Ornithopter. Based on some of history's earliest flying machines, the free-to-cast O2 Flyer is one of Magic's most recognizable cards, first printed in antiquities and still receiving reprints to this day. But decades before the artifact's first printing in 1994, Frank Herbert introduced the ornithopter into the sci-fi and fantasy lexicon in his 1965 book, Dune. Even with Dune's recent explosion in popularity thanks to the movies by Denis Villeneuve, Dune's outsized influence on genre fiction remains underacknowledged and downright hard to wrap your head around. With its giant sandworms, scrying and fortune-telling, and its recent forays into the aesthetics of outer space with Unfinity and Edge of Eternities, Magic the Gathering owes as much to Dune as anyone, which begs the question, are we ever getting a universes beyond Dune? Hi, my name's Alessio, I'm a 15-year Commander player, and I hate Magic's Universes Beyond sets for the simple reason that I love making custom cards based on outside characters and stories. And it's not just me. If you're unfamiliar with Star Wars The Gathering, do yourself a favor and give it a look. It's a series of fan-made sets totally committed to synthesizing the characters and story of Star Wars through Magic mechanics that has been free to print out and draft and play for years. When you look at the work and love put into Star Wars The Gathering and so many other fan projects, it's pretty clear what's going on. The community invented Magic crossovers, and Wizards has stolen it just so they can sell it right back to us. That's my rant on that. If you don't like it, please yell at me in the comments and boost this video's algo. Everyone else, buckle in, because if Universes Beyond Dune is inevitable, I'm claiming it for the fans today, and I've got a Spice Hoard's worth of custom Dune cards to prove it. A modern spin on Star Wars The Gathering, Universes Beyond Dune is a set of 16 commander decks meant to tell the story and capture the feeling of all 6 books in Frank Herbert's original Dune Chronicles. These decks are book first in the same way UB Spider-Man was based on the comics, but not book only. I will be nodding to some iconic moments from all 3 major film adaptations, as well as drawing on them for art and flavor text. This won't be too noticeable in our first 4 decks, since all 3 adaptations are very faithful to Book 1 in their own ways, but if you want to be sure to catch every reference you can, grab a book reader buddy, and they'll be delighted to fill you in on anything you miss. Disclaimer, I haven't playtested these decks, nor do I claim to be a skilled designer of Magic cards or environments, but my intent here is for these decks to have interplay with one another, to build on a core series of mechanical themes just as the books build on their literary themes, and to present a convincing vision of what Dune could look like in Magic the Gathering. I'm also shooting for them to feel as close to boxed Commander Precons as possible, prioritizing fun and variance over game-warping cards and optimized lines to victory. I'm designing 32 original cards for each deck, and filling out the rest of the 99 with existing cards that play into the given theme, while doing everything I can to minimize breaking the immersion through flavor mismatches. No cards called Llanowar, whatever, or Urza's Blah. Wizards and ogres are okay in moderation, but no Vidalkins, no angels, no zombies, or any other fantasy life forms that don't exist in Dune. Today, I'm going to be breaking down my design for Emperor Eternal, one of 4 decks based on the major factions in the first book in the Dune Chronicles, or Dune Part 1 and Part 2 if you're a movie person. This deck is all about the Padishah Emperor of the known universe, and the sprawling military, political, and economic forces he galvanizes to suppress House Atreides and consolidate unequaled power. Emperor Eternal is a white-black-green deck, also known as Abzan. For every deck in the series, I chose colors that both matched the faction at a philosophical level, while also tying those colors to wider cultures and factions in the Dune universe. As we covered in our Atreides Acumen video, white, the color of authority, represents the Faufreluches, or the feudal power structure of the Empire. Everything from Chom to the Landsraad to, yes of course, the Imperial throne itself. So while white is of course a perfect match for the most powerful man in the universe, it's also mechanically the color most closely associated with life gain, which this deck is built around. Black, the color of death, functions here primarily to represent the Sarduakar, also known as the Emperor's Blades. Recruited from the imperial prison planet Seleucia Secundus and indoctrinated in warrior mysticism, death is both the origin and the destination for members of the Sardaukar legions. At a narrative level, Emperor Shaddam IV distances himself from the sorts of tactics that would be characteristic of Black, laundering his use of them through Salusa Secundus, as well as through Giddy Prime, which you'll know is tied to Black if you watched our Harkonnen Hubris video. Black is of course the other main color that gains life, though typically by draining it from others. And green, the color of land, here represents the steersman of the Spacing Guild, who the Emperor relies on to ferry him between the many planets he governs, and to find him new territory to expand onto. The Guild navigators rely heavily on spice melange, and thus on planet Dune itself, which you'll remember are both tied to green if you watched our Fremen Foresight video. Green is also no stranger to life gain, a mechanic that complements the grindier games that both the rampy and stompy sides of the color lean toward. The Abzan colors together suggest a slow, careful faction that sees the world as a series of exchanges and conversions between life, death, wealth, and power. While I've of course developed some of my own mechanical innovations to bring Dune to life in Magic the Gathering, I've tried to primarily draw from existing playstyles and mechanics, as official pre-constructed decks tend to revive and build on past concepts rather than introducing their own brand new idea. The Imperial mechanics reward you for building up and protecting the highest life total at the table, spreading setup pieces and payoffs across several packages, including vehicles, knights, and artifact tokens. Having a higher life total than anyone else at the table triggers many powerful effects in this deck, so it's important to be able to gain life throughout the game. The most common avenue for life gain in this deck is through the Spice tokens, an original mechanic I've developed just for Universes Beyond Dune. Representing the all-important Spice Melange, Spice are artifact tokens that can be tapped and sacrificed to activate 3 simultaneous abilities. Gain 1 life, scry 1, and put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. In a world in which everything seems to create clues and food and treasures and artifact tokens have completely reshaped the way we play Magic, and Commander especially, we would expect nothing less from the most valuable substance in the known universe. While the Worm and Druid cards we looked at in our Fremen Foresight video made Spice tokens naturally, the Emperor is not personally on Arrakis, and so instead receives Spice through another new mechanic called Chome Contracts. Chome Contracts are emblem-style markers similar to rad counters, as you can gain and lose them throughout the game. At the beginning of your upkeep, you make a Spice token for each contract you've earned. But on your opponent's turns, they can steal one of your contracts by tapping an untapped creature they control and giving you a treasure token. Stealing contracts this way can either be done competitively to deprive other players of Spice, or cooperatively to allow 2 players to keep handing bonuses back and forth. Once you've reached the highest life total, you'll be able to pump your Sarduakar legions, which you'll recognize in this deck as 3/2 Black Human Knights. While a 3/2 token certainly packs a punch on its own, there's plenty of Knight Typal support in this deck to make sure that they can get through and protect you even if your commander isn't online. You can also attack with the deck's hanger of vehicles, which get even more powerful when crewed by the pilot-type creatures of the Spacing Guild, who in turn give you other ways to spend your Spice tokens if you no longer need them to gain life. And because of their Spice addiction, pilots are one of the rare creature types outside of Advisor where you can find Prescience, an original keyword that appears across many decks in Universes Beyond Dune. Permanents with Prescience allow you to look at the top card of your library at any time, and the top card of the library of any player who doesn't have a permanent with Prescience. This is a reference to how 2 characters with Prescience, such as Paul Muad'Dib and Edric the Guild Navigator, cannot see what the other one is doing and thinking in their visions of the future. While Prescience has a very specific meaning in Dune related to seeing the future, it here is a catch-all for a variety of mental techniques, such as Mentat Projection and Bene Gesserit Truth Sense. With all that preamble out of the way, it's time for the moment you've all been waiting for, the card-by-card deck breakdown. Our face commander for this deck is the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV, a 3/5 human noble for 3 white-black-green. He's got some familiar keywords in extort and, yeah, I know you saw it, eminence. Cards on the table? I hate eminence as much as anyone, but you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, and I think there are sparing, responsible uses of it in very narrow design spaces, such as on a card representing the Emperor of the Known Universe. Yeah, I think he's got a little eminence, and if you hate this design, great, you're supposed to hate him. Whenever you cast a legendary spell while Shaddam IV is on your board or in your command zone, you earn one of those sweet Chom contracts. And when your spice tokens and extort triggers have brought your life total up higher than anyone else's, you unlock the Emp's beginning of combat trigger, which untaps all of your creatures, puts a +1/+1 counter on each of them, and gives them vigilance until end of turn. This is not only, of course, a huge boost in combat, but it can ramp you via mana dorks, and most notably, let you effectively crew your vehicles for free, and still have your vehicles and your pilots untapped next turn to block with. Like our Atreides Acumen deck, our backup commander option here is a partner pair that opens up new play pattern options within the same synergies. If you've seen Dune Part 2, you'll surely remember the Bene Gesserit sister, Lady Margot Fenring, here a 1/3 human advisor for 1 white. But only book readers got to meet her fascinating partner, the Mentat tactician, Count Hazimir Fenring, for our purposes a 5/3 human advisor noble for black, green. The Fenrings are best friends with Shaddam and the other Corrinos, and some of the universe's major power brokers. So rather than a linear life gain strategy, this pair combines outlets to pay down your resources, along with triggered bonuses to catch you up on those resources when your tank is the lowest. With Hazimir's Prescience to guide you, you can pay 4 life at sorcery speed to reveal the top card of each library, and put a +1/+1 counter on each knight and each advisor you control for each creature card revealed this way. Did paying that cost bring your life total low? No problem. Whenever an opponent gains life when your life total is the lowest, Margot gains you that much life too. If you have the fewest creatures and creatures enter under an opponent's control, Margot also makes you a 3/2 Sarduakar Knight token, which will come in handy later because you can sack a creature token to Hazimir to tap him and give him hexproof until end of turn. Hazimir also lets you pitch 2 cards from your hand to give a creature -2/-2 for the turn. But if an opponent draws 2 or more cards, while you have the fewest cards in your hand, Margot will let you draw a card too. Knobs, levers, and fake-outs for days. And if Count Fenring's stats and abilities seem absolutely stacked, yep, that's also on purpose. He was a failed Kwisatz Haderach, who could have had a much bigger impact on the story, but chose to remain neutral for reasons we can only speculate on. The Emperor's truthsayer, Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mahayam, also lets you play around with the new prescience mechanic. For 3 white-black, you get a 2/4 human advisor with vigilance, and, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may reveal the top card of any library. Until your next turn, whenever a player casts a spell that shares a type with that card, creatures you control gain Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. A combination that anyone who sat across a table from a Vault of the Archangel knows is serious business. A studious historian, the Princess Irulan of course deals with sagas and historic permanence. She's a 1/1 human noble for green-white, and when she enters, you may return up to 2 saga cards from your graveyard to your hand. She also has an ability that triggers whenever you cast an historic spell, gaining you 3 life. However, if it's the second resolution of this ability this turn, instead, target creature gets +3/+3 and first strike until end of turn. Or if it's the third resolution of this ability this turn, instead, you draw 3 cards. In the book, a Ramsham Sardaukar infiltrator is sent to Arrakis to assassinate Muad'Dib, but borks it big time, and his capture leads to Paul finding out that the Emperor was in on the plan to destroy the Atreides from the beginning. While some people suspect that the cut Tim Blake Nelson scene from Part 2 had Nelson playing Count Fenring, I have a suspicion he was playing this guy. A Ramsham is a 3/2 human knight for 2 and a black. When a Ramsham enters, another target player gains control of him, and he's not necessarily a gift you want to be receiving. He says creatures you control can't block knights or nobles. But it's not all bad.
Whenever a Ramsham deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card and lose 1 life. Then a Ramsham's owner draws a card and loses 1 life. That ability is inspired by the card Pendant of Prosperity and works the same way. If you both control and own a Ramsham, you get both of those triggers for yourself, which just might happen because you can sacrifice another legendary creature to have a Ramsham's owner gain back control of him. The Padishah Starship Lighter is a legendary vehicle, not a legendary creature, but recall that official commander rules now allow legendary vehicles to be your commander. So if you want to play some mono-green artifacts, you can pay 3 and a green for this vehicle with crew 2, whose power and toughness are each equal to the number of artifacts you control. As long as no other player has a higher life total than you do, the Lighter is an artifact creature with flying and vigilance, no crew required. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, target token you control becomes an artifact creature with flying and vigilance until end of turn, and its power and toughness are also each equal to the number of artifacts you control. In this art from the David Lynch movie, you can see both the Lighter and the hutment that opens underneath it that contains all the rest of the Emperor's forces, so turning your tokens into pseudo-vehicles for the turn is kind of like scrambling the jet fighters here. Let's move on to our other rares and mythics. With the Spacing Guild, we complete a cycle of monocolor sagas that perpetuate themselves when they reach their final chapter, showing how the major past events in the Dune universe continue to impact things in the present. At Chapter 1, you look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put up to 1 pilot, up to 1 vehicle, and up to 1 land card from among them directly onto the battlefield. Chapter 2 earns you a Chom contract. Then you earn another Chom contract if you control both a pilot and a vehicle. The difference between 1 and 2 contracts is pretty big, so make sure you're using Prescience and the Scry from your Spice tokens to increase the likelihood that Chapter 1 will fully set up this play. And at Chapter 3, we floor it. You can sacrifice any number of Spice to put that many +1/+1 counters on each creature and each vehicle you control. And those creatures and vehicles can't be blocked this turn except by artifacts. And if you sacrificed 3 or more Spice this way, exile the Spacing Guild and return it to the battlefield at the beginning of your next upkeep. The Sarduakar War Chant is part of yet another cycle of legendary X spells of different card types that represent the universe's major religious belief systems. This legendary enchantment costs X black, and when it enters, you create X 3/2 Knight tokens. It has a static ability that gives all knights you control Menace, and at the beginning of your end step, if no other player has a higher life total than you do, you may return the Sarduakar War Chant to your hand so that you can recast it later for reinforcements. The Battle of Corrino is part of another cycle of 2-color sagas showing mostly more recent events in the Dune story, though this is one of my very rare dips into the dubiously canonical Brian Herbert prequel books. Telling the story of how the original Corrino family defeated the thinking machines in a huge spaceship battle, Chapter 1 starts you out by creating a 4/4 colorless artifact vehicle token with flying and crew 1. Chapter 2 says, until end of turn, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, destroy 1 artifact or enchantment that player controls. And once you've cleared all those artifacts out of the way, Chapter 3 lets you celebrate by gaining 2 life for each artifact you control and each artifact in all graveyards. Emperor's Command is a sorcery for 2 white, black, green, and like all commands, it says choose 2, with the options being gain 2 life for each artifact you control, create a 3/2 black human knight creature token, until end of turn, target vehicle becomes an artifact creature, gains lifelink, and cannot be blocked except by artifacts, and destroy target legendary permanent. That last one is a nasty nod to the undoing of the Atreides. Salusa Secundus, Prison Planet, is this deck's rare ability land. It taps for colorless, or you can tap it along with 4 white, black, green to create 2 3/2 black human knight creature tokens. While that isn't necessarily steep for a repeatable ability like this, it nevertheless costs 1 generic less for each creature that died this turn. Appeal to the Landsrad is a sorcery for 5 white, and get those I voted stickers ready because we have a Council's Dilemma. Beginning with you, each player votes for flow or stop. For each flow vote, you create a Spice token, a Treasure token, and a 3/2 Knight token. And for each stop vote, exile target non-land permanent. The House's Major may have the legal right to give the Emperor the finger, but that doesn't mean there aren't consequences to standing up to him. Fold Space is a sorcery for X green, 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 green. But we're doing space travel here, so for each pilot-type creature you control, you can add 2 to that X value. Fold Space lets you reach right through the cosmos and search any player's library for a creature or artifact card with mana value X and put it right onto the battlefield. And by sacrificing 3 spice, you can return Fold Space from your graveyard to your hand. Of course, referencing how Space and Guild Navigators use copious spice to find new pathways through the stars. Our last rare is the Golden Lion Throne, a legendary artifact for 1 and a white. When the Golden Lion Throne enters, if you cast it, you earn a Chome contract. And of course that's going to turn into 2 contracts if Shaddam IV is your commander and sees you cast this legendary spell. On top of that, at the beginning of your upkeep, you gain 1 life for each artifact you control. If you have the throne in play, chances are you're going to be sitting on it. Moving on to the uncommons, Arakeen Shield Wall is 1 green and a white for a 0/7 wall, naturally with Defender. When did Magic stop making as many walls? That's like the most vivid thing I remember from early Magic. Whenever a creature an opponent controls deals damage to Arakeen Shield Wall, create that many spice tokens. People are either going to stay away from you, or they're going to be playing right into your plans. Chome Delegate costs 1 and a white, and is a 0/1 human. Yeah, boring type line. You're looking at this guy and you're like, he should be an advisor, right? In any other set, yes, but the advisors in Universes Beyond Dune are psychics and human supercomputers, and this is just a guy with a briefcase. He represents the most powerful holding company in the universe, so of course he's also got Extort. And when he enters, if you cast him, you create a Chome contract. But it gets even better. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each Chome contract you've earned. Propaganda effects are kind of annoying, but I do think they're an important part of Magic, and I'm kind of surprised Wizards hasn't given us more compromises like this, where you get the effect as long as you've met a certain condition to keep it live. I guess Sphere of Safety scared them off. Sphere of Safety would be perfectly balanced if it wasn't itself an enchantment. Guild Highliner is the big daddy vehicle for this deck, a 2/5 for 6 with Crew 4. When it attacks, you may put a vehicle card with any power or a creature card with less power than Guild Highliner onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking, and if it's a vehicle, of course, it becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. You can also sacrifice a spice to put a +1/+1 counter on target vehicle you control, increasing the ceiling on the kinds of creatures you can cheat out with it. The Hunter Seeker, one of which was sent to assassinate Paul at the beginning of Book 1, is a 1/1 assassin construct for 4 generic. It has flying, death touch, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you sacrifice it, and if you do, that player loses life equal to the number of artifacts you control. Melange Harvester is another vehicle, costing 5 generic, and when crewed 3, it becomes a 4/4 with trample. This is a simple but important one, because whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you create that many spice tokens. Sarduakar Squadron is another 3/2 human knight for 2 and a black. When you cast it, you get to create a token copy of it if no other player has a higher life total than you do, and it gives other knights you control +0/+1, meaning that if you can stick that copy, you'll have 2 3/3s. Third Stage Navigator is here from the Spacing Guild, a 4/4 mutant pilot with prescience for 4 green. I think Denis Villeneuve has something against weird-looking things, he just doesn't like that. So his version of the Guild Navigators, so far at least, have been bipedal, and you can't really see through the spice gas in their space helmets, but the Navigators do an amount of spice that actually physically mutates them, and of course that's going to come with serious spice addiction. So whenever Third Stage Navigator becomes tapped, sacrifice a spice and put a +1/+1 counter on it, and if you don't, sacrifice Third Stage Navigator. But it's worth keeping them around because vehicles crewed by Third Stage Navigator gain lifelink and vigilance, and their power and toughness become equal to this creature's power and toughness until end of turn. Zealous Bashar is a 3/2 human knight for 2 white-black. He's got lifelink, and whenever he or another knight dies, each opponent loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. And you can speed that process along by paying 3 at sorcery speed and sacrificing an artifact or another creature to draw a card. This card very much embodies the aggro aristocrats thing this deck has going on, As the card pool for Commander balloons exponentially, it's just so easy to focus your token deck either on Go Wide or on Drain Gain, so I'm really excited about pieces that aren't necessarily the most efficient, but that allow you to choose what kind of token game you're going to play on the fly. And moving on to the commons, Imperial Conditioning finally completes a cycle of auras that represent the kind of training each of our major factions bestows upon their acolytes and apprentices. For 1 and a white, Imperial Conditioning gives Enchanted Creature lifelink and vigilance. Enchanted Creature also cannot be copied, and control of it cannot switch. This is based on how Dr. Yue's Imperial Conditioning was meant to keep him completely loyal to the Atreides, not that that went great. Because each of these decks has 2 of the training auras, we also have a copy of Harkonnen Scheming. For 1 and a black, Harkonnen Scheming gives Enchanted Creature Death Touch. Whenever that creature attacks, it connives, and when the enchanted creature dies or is put into exile, you return it to the battlefield under your control. Light Path to Kaitain is this deck's last cycle card, an Evolving Wilds variant with archetypal upside. You may tap and sacrifice it to search your library for a basic plains, swamp, or forest, and put it onto the battlefield tapped. And whenever Light Path to Kaitain is put into your graveyard by any means, you gain 2 life. This card references Kaitain instead of Seleucia Secundus because, at this point in the story anyway, Kaitain is the home of Emperor Shaddam IV and the Corrino family. Don't get me wrong, Seleucia is the ancestral homeworld of the Corrinos, but these days it's mostly a desolate prison planet full of the universe's most murdery dudes. Speaking of which, Anoint in Blood is an aura for 1 black. Enchanted Creature is a knight in addition to its other types, and whenever you sacrifice another permanent, you put a +1/+1 counter on Enchanted Creature. Plus, when Enchanted Creature dies, you gain life equal to its power. Guild Transport Ship costs 2 generic and is a 1/3 vehicle with flying and crew 1. A flyer is never bad to have, but most crucially, creature or not, it lets you cast historic spells as though they had flash. Highliner Steward has not been mutated by the Spice Gas yet. It's a 1/1 human pilot for 1 green. Depending on what you need, it's either a Llanowar Elves, tapping for 1 green mana, or you can tap it and sacrifice a spice to give target historic permanent hexproof until end of turn. And if it's a vehicle, it becomes an artifact creature until end of turn as well. And his colleague, Spice Chain Steersman, is a 2/2 mutant pilot with prescience for 2 and a green. The Steersman lets you crew vehicles as if its power were 2 greater, and it lets you cast spells from the top of your library as long as their mana value is equal to or less than the number of spice you've sacrificed this turn. Deck space in Commander these days is so tight, so there's nothing I love more than a ramp spell with some relevant upside. Steal onto Arrakis is a sorcery for 2 black-green. It lets you search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Then, target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn, where X is equal to the number of lands you control that share a land type with that card. Trade Deal, I can't believe there isn't a card already named this, is an instant for 4 and a white. It says destroy up to 1 artifact or enchantment each opponent controls, and each player who controlled a permanent destroyed this way may create a treasure token. For each player who does, you create a treasure token as well. And regardless of whatever else happens resolving the top part of this card, it also earns you a Chom contract. And we wrap things up with a copy of Chaumarchy, an instant for 2 and a black, representing food and drink-borne poison assassination techniques in the Dune universe. It destroys target creature, and if that creature was legendary, its controller also discards a card at random. And if an opponent happened to have sacrificed an artifact this turn, like a food or a spice, you may pay 0 rather than paying Chaumarchy's mana cost. If these decks were made by Wizards of the Coast, they'd likely all have original Dune-themed art. So for each deck, I've chosen 2 staple cards to give an alt art treatment to. And here we have Bastion of Remembrance and Cultivator's Caravan. Bastion of Remembrance features Princess Irulan recording the history of her father's imperial career. In addition to bolstering the deck's life gain potential, reflavoring a favorite aristocrats card around a literal princess is pretty clever, if I do say so myself. Cultivator's Caravan already sounds like something trawling Arrakis for spice, and is conveniently also a vehicle mana dork, i.e. maximum synergy with our face commander. If you click the link in the description to see the full deck list, including all reprints, look for cards like Dune Drifter, Blind Obedience, Second Harvest, and Marionette Master that either complement the themes of the deck, fit the flavor, or themselves inspired some of these original designs. And that's it for Emperor Eternal and the 4 pot of decks representing Book 1. If you thought this was cool, please give us a like and comment with your favorite original design. And definitely let me know what your experience was like if you try these in paper or on Tabletop Simulator. And make sure to subscribe for notifications on the next Universes Beyond Dune video.